Hi, guys. Tonight we drift back through time, and you ease yourself into the chilly quiet of 19th century America. Snow presses against a small window. A faint wood smoke haze hangs in the air. The world feels slower here, heavier, as if someone has covered the entire century with a thick wool blanket. You hear a faraway horse clip down a hard frozen road, and for a moment you picture how far you would actually have to travel just to borrow a cup of sugar. You feel the cold bite at your fingertips, and you already sense that this version of Christmas asks more of you than you ask of it. You probably will not survive this without at least losing the feeling in your toes for a few minutes, but that is part of the charm. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and the local time, because it is always a quiet thrill to imagine where you are listening from. Now, dim the lights and follow the shifting glow straight into the story. You stand at the edge of 1800s America with snow swirling around your boots. It crunches underfoot, crisp and dry, the kind that seems to squeak when you move. The land stretches wide in every direction. Forests deeper than your imagination can reach small towns, tucked between frozen rivers and farms, spaced so far apart that neighbors may only visit by sleigh if the drifts behave. Christmas in this world does not explode with color or sound. It unfolds slowly, quietly, mainly inside homes warmed by fireplaces that never seem to put out enough heat. The most mainstream historical fact that meets you right away is that Christmas is not even a federal holiday until 1870. So depending on where you stand in the early century, the day is treated as a modest religious occasion, a social gathering, or sometimes just another winter morning. The air feels raw as you draw it into your lungs. Wood smoke mixes with the faint aroma of cured meat hanging somewhere nearby, and you sense how much life here depends on careful storage. Families spend the year preparing for winter because winter likes to test every human it meets. The path you follow leads toward a small homestead, but before you reach it, you feel how the land shapes these holidays. Snowdrifts lean against fences. A chicken flaps out of a shed, irritated that you disturbed its one warm spot. Somewhere, a dog barks its echo bouncing off leafless trees. You slip your hand along a rough wooden railing and wonder how many people have done the same just to steady themselves in this uneven world. You step through the front gate of a typical home and notice something odd. Despite the cold, someone has left an apple or two on the porch to freeze, maybe for a treat later, or simply because the root cellar is full. A quirky little tidbit historians enjoy mentioning is that during particularly cold winters, people sometimes use nature as a free icebox and tucked food outdoors, trusting that no creature with paws or wings would steal it first. You glance at the apples and wonder if a hungry raccoon passed through last night, made a mental note, and planned a midnight raid. The doorway creaks as you push it open. Warm air breathes over your face, but not much of it. This home relies on a single fireplace, its flames low and stingy. You rub your hands and keep them near the embers. You can hear quiet voices in the next room, maybe preparing supper or mending clothes. Everyone works constantly here, even during the holidays. That is partly why celebrations feel small and thoughtful. People save their energy for survival, for weathering storms, for tending livestock, and making sure firewood stacks do not collapse at the worst moment. As you wander inside, you pause over a small table. A candle flickers in a tin holder. Wax drips down one side, forming a tiny frozen waterfall. If you lean close enough, you can smell the faint sweetness of beeswax. You imagine how many evenings families gather around light like this, eyes straining to read, sew, or write letters. Many households do not have more than a couple books, and you hold one now. It's cloth binding, worn and soft. You run your thumb along the edge and imagine a mother teaching a child to read by this very flame. Historians still argue whether early 19th century Americans viewed Christmas as more sacred than social, or more social than sacred, or simply too varied to categorize. That ambiguity hovers in the room like the soft glow from the candle. Some families treat the season as a steady religious ritual, others as an excuse for neighborly visits that break up winter monotony, and others hardly celebrate at all. You sense that everything here depends on region, heritage, weather, and circumstance. You shift deeper into the home. Footsteps creak overhead. The wooden beams flex slightly, making you almost duck even though you're safe. The living space is small, but arranged carefully. A rocking chair stands near the hearth, placed at just the perfect angle to catch heat. The scent of smoked ham drifts in from the kitchen. You follow it and find a modest spread being prepared for the holiday days ahead. There is salt pork, root vegetables, maybe a small pie filled with apples, saved from autumn. Everything is rationed. Every bite reflects months of planning. A stack of stitched stockings lies near the table. They look plain made from leftover fabric, but you recognize the hope sewn into them. Children will check these early, long before sunrise, hoping for a bit of candy, a small toy, or something practical like a pair of knitted mittens. You picture your own hands sliding into wool mittens that itch slightly, but warm you quickly. In a world without central heating, warmth becomes something close to love. You return to the main room and sit on a low bench. The wood feels cool under your legs, but it holds you steady, anchoring you in the moment. You listen to the shifting pops inside the fireplace. The light from it flickers across the bare floorboards, making shadows crawl along the walls. You can practically feel the past leaning against your shoulder, whispering its stories, inviting you to notice details you might overlook. For example, there's a braided rug near the hearth, handmade from worn rags and old garments, brightened by whatever scraps the family could salvage. You touch its surface and feel both softness and history woven together. Outside, the wind starts to rise. It whistles at the edges of the window frames, and you sense the family's constant awareness of drafts. People stuff cracks with cloth paper or moss. They hang quilts against doors. Every patch has purpose. You run your fingers along a seam where two fabric squares meet, noticing how careful stitches hold them together like a quiet partnership between past and present. Your eyes drift toward a narrow staircase. You imagine children stumbling down it on Christmas morning, breath held tight with excitement. You picture the oldest child trying not to look too eager, pretending not to care about whatever surprises might wait in those stockings. A memory from your own life rises, and you let it warm you for a moment. The way joy moves through time is strange. It jumps centuries with perfect grace. You rise slowly. A floorboard groans beneath you. The candle flickers again. You smell balsam in the air, faint but present, suggesting someone has an evergreen branch tucked nearby to freshen the room. You brush your fingers against the needles and feel their sharp edges. Even small greenery feels luxurious at this time of year. It reminds families that spring will return. The house settles around you as if accepting your presence. You breathe deeply and let the warmth sink into your bones. You feel the weight of the century pressing gently on your shoulders, not to burden you, but to show you how Christmas thrives through modesty, resilience, and careful hope. You step toward the door, ready to follow the story forward. Snow still falls soft and silent, as if inviting you to continue your walk into the wider 1800s world, where countless families celebrate the season in their own quiet ways. You step back outside into the sting of winter air and feel the immediate contrast between the home's soft warmth and the crisp bite waiting beyond the threshold. Snowflakes drift onto your collar and melt instantly, tiny cold kisses that remind you that most of 19th century America expects you to toughen up a little. You pull your coat tighter even though the fabric feels too thin. And as you move away from the doorway, you notice how the house itself seems to shiver slightly in the wind. In the 1800s, every home breathes with the weather. Walls creak when the temperature drops. Windows tremble when gusts slide past them. You tread across the yard and toward the next homestead, where you will step into another swirl of tradition, warmth, and subtle discomfort. The path crunches beneath your boots. Ice glints faintly in the moonlight. A barn stands to your left, its wooden siding patched with a mix of shingles and whatever material the family had available at the time. You pause by the barn door and lay a hand on the rough plank wood. Even through gloves, you can feel how cold it is, like touching a frozen lake. Inside, the animals shift around in the straw. Their soft snorts create fog that rises slowly toward the rafters. Animals are a kind of holiday clock here. If the animals are calm, the day is calm. If the animals scatter or stamp their hooves, the humans take it as a sign that weather is shifting or that company is on the way. A widely known historical fact greets you here. Holiday preparations in many homes begin at dawn. No sleeping in because you want a quiet morning. No lingering under blankets. Fireplaces must be stoked, water hauled, breakfast prepared, and chores completed before the day can slide into something festive. You take a breath and picture yourself carrying 2 metal pails of water from a well, each one freezing your fingers as it sloshes. You try not to grimace. Someone did this every day without complaining. As you walk closer to the front door, you smell bread warming inside and feel your stomach tighten with hunger, even though you know the loaf is small and precious. Before entering, you run your hand over the exterior wall and feel the texture of hand-sawn boards. A quirky little tidbit tucked into this moment is that people often stuffed leftover newspaper or wool scraps between the boards to block drafts during winter. Sometimes they discovered old letters hidden there years later when repairing the walls. Imagine finding a message from a stranger who lived in your home decades before, scribbled on brittle paper and tucked away to stop cold air from sneaking in. You push open the door. A rush of warm light spills across your boots, and your eyes adjust to a room that glows with a gentle orange of firelight. The main living space stretches before you, compact yet full of life. A small table sits near the hearth, with chairs arranged in a way that suggests everyone seeks the same prize: direct heat. You rub your hands together instinctively. The warmth feels thin but determined, like a handshake that tries its best. A kettle simmers at the hearth. The scent of something earthy and herbal fills the room. Maybe chamomile or mint grown in the summer and dried in bunches that hang from the rafters. Tea is treasured here and served sparingly. You lean in and feel steam brush your face. It carries with it a softness that makes your eyelids grow heavier. You hear someone humming faintly, almost lost beneath the crackle of burning wood. On the wall hangs a modest shelf holding a few objects that help shape the holiday mood. A Bible sits at one end, worn and handled with reverence. Next to it rests a small wooden box that likely holds keepsakes or sewing supplies. A small carving of a dove perches beside a dried orange slice threaded with string. You lift the orange slice gently. Despite its age, a faint citrus scent lingers. Historians sometimes debate whether these scented ornaments originated from domestic creativity or from imported customs that families adapted over generations. The truth is probably a mix of both, which mirrors how so much of American holiday tradition evolves. A child rushes past you, giggling. Their footsteps light across the floorboards. You notice the child's cheeks are flushed from playing outdoors. Their wool stockings sag slightly around their ankles. They clutch something small in their hand, maybe a chestnut or a marble. You watch them for a moment and realize that entertainment in this home does not require screens or speakers. Children invent games with whatever the world offers them: a string tied to a stick, a hoop made from an old barrel. You admire the simplicity, even as you imagine modern children dissolving in confusion without Wi-Fi. The kitchen draws your attention. Next, a woman stands by the table, kneading dough with steady practice motions. Her palms press firmly, then fold, then press again. The dough squeaks softly against the wood. You can smell yeast and flour and the faint aroma of something sweet warming in the oven. Maybe molasses cookies or a fruit tart made from dried berries. You watch her hands and think about how many holiday meals depend on this exact motion, repeated thousands of times across the century. A small pot of beans simmers nearby, bubbling gently. Another pot holds root vegetables dug from the cold ground weeks earlier. Food is not abundant here, but it is prepared with care. Each dish represents effort that began months before. Your eyes settle on a jar of pickled cabbage glowing pink in the low light. Its color surprises you for a moment, like finding a flower blooming in winter. You glance toward the woman and imagine her explaining that preserving vegetables is less about preference and more about survival. You take a seat on a wooden bench near the fire. The bench creaks slightly but supports your weight, as if welcoming you into the rhythm of the home. You absorb every sound around you: the soft whistle of wind against the shutters, the clink of pottery bowls being arranged for supper, the quiet laugh of someone in the next room. The house feels full, even though only a handful of people live here. Perhaps it is the closeness of winter that pulls everyone tight, building community from necessity. You look toward a wall quilt pieced together from scraps of fabric that once belonged to shirts, aprons, and dresses. The colors vary wildly, but the stitching ties them into harmony. You run your hand lightly over one corner and sense both texture and memory. Each square feels like a season preserved. Families often worked on these quilts together, trading gossip and stories while their fingers move through fabric. You picture yourself sitting among them, your stitches uneven compared to theirs. As you settle deeper into the warmth, you notice another small detail that roots you in the era. A pair of leather boots stands drying near the hearth, their toes pointed inward. Snow melt gathers beneath them, forming a small puddle. You watch a droplet slide off the heel and imagine the miles they carried someone across frozen ground earlier today. Someone reliant on these boots for errands, chores, and gathering firewood. Even during holidays, somewhere in the room, someone begins tuning a fiddle, plucking strings softly. The notes wobble a little, searching for clarity. The sound adds another layer to the atmosphere, transforming the space into a gentle waiting room for evening festivities. Holidays here are built from sounds like these, simple and intimate. No orchestras, no recorded music, just a fiddle or voice, or sometimes a flute carved by hand. You close your eyes for a moment and picture the entire home glowing in a halo of firelight while winter swirls outside. The warmth, the closeness, the scent of bread, the clutter of handmade objects all merge into a portrait of holiday comfort that feels earned rather than purchased. When you open your eyes again, the fire crackles and the kettle hums. The room seems to breathe with you, waiting patiently for the story to continue. You follow the drifting warmth toward the kitchen, where the scents of the season swirl together so richly that you can almost taste them before you step inside. The room glows with soft firelight, as if the walls themselves have absorbed years of cooking and laughter and quiet winter evenings. You stand still for a moment, letting the aromas settle around you. They arrive in gentle waves: roasted meat, wood smoke, dried apples simmering in a pot, a hint of cinnamon, the tang of vinegar from a pickle jar resting near the window. Christmas in 1800s. America is a feast built slowly, pulled from cellars, dried herbs, and whatever the land offered months before. It is not abundance in the modern sense. It is gratitude disguised as flavor. You lean toward the hearth where a cast iron pot hangs from a swinging arm. The lid rattles softly as steam pushes against it. Inside, a stew simmers with beans and smoked ham. You catch the first warm breath of it, earthy and comforting. A widely accepted historical fact comes to mind. Most households in this century rely heavily on preserved foods. Salted meats, pickled vegetables, dried fruits, and stored root crops make up the backbone of winter meals. You reach toward the pot, feel the heat radiating, and imagine the hours spent preparing these ingredients long before winter arrived. The kitchen table is covered in bowls, wooden boards dusted with flour, and a few simple utensils. A woman stands beside it, kneading dough with the same steady rhythm you saw earlier. Her hands sink into the soft mass, folding it over and pressing it flat again. Each movement releases a puff of flour that drifts gently through the air. You step closer and catch the warm, yeasty scent rising from the dough. Bread is not just food here. It is tradition, labor, and comfort all at once. Your attention shifts toward a shelf where jars of preserves line up like quiet ornaments. Amber honey, ruby-tinted jam from summer berries, golden slices of dried peach resting in cloth-tied pouches. You touch one of the jars and feel the faint stickiness along the rim, a reminder that sweetness is rare and precious. A quirky historical tidbit settles into your mind. Some families used to suspend fresh pies in cloth bundles from ceiling beams to keep curious mice from sampling them. Imagine reaching up for dessert, like picking fruit from a kitchen tree. Someone stirs a pot nearby. You lean in and discover dried apple rings plumping in spiced water, turning soft and fragrant. Apples were often stored through winter in barrels packed with straw sawdust, and families relied on them for pies, sauces, or just a rare sweet treat on cold evenings. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg rises from the pot, drifting through the entire room. You breathe it in slowly, letting it settle like a memory you did not know you had. A child sits by the table, peeling a potato with careful concentration. Their movements are slow but determined, and the peel curls into a long ribbon on the floor. The child looks up, beaming proudly. You smile back, knowing that in this century, children contribute to every part of daily life, even holiday preparations. Helping in the kitchen is not a chore. It is participation in the ritual. The woman beside the hearth picks up a tin grater and begins shredding nutmeg over a bowl of custard. The scent rises sharp and rich. She glances at you with a soft smile and wipes her hands on her apron before setting the grater aside. She reaches for a jar of molasses and pours a thin stream of dark syrup into the mix. Its aroma is deep and smoky, and you feel your mouth water. Molasses is inexpensive compared to refined sugar, so it shows up in many holiday recipes, cookies, cakes, breads, puddings. You watch the syrup coil and disappear into the mixture like a ribbon of night. Then, you notice a small wooden mold on the table carved with ornate designs. You pick it up. Its edges are worn from years of use. Historians still debate whether such carved cookie molds in early America were primarily decorative, functional, or simply an imported trend from European traditions. You turn the mold in your hands, imagining dough pressed into it to form little images of stars, flowers, or playful animals. Each cookie carries the imprint of history in its grooves. The air shifts slightly as someone opens the door to the root cellar below. A cold draft sweeps into the room along with the earthy smell of stored vegetables. You peek down the wooden steps and see rows of potatoes, beets, carrots, and onions resting in baskets. You realize how much foresight goes into every winter meal. Someone dug, sorted, dried, and packed these foods away months ago when the ground was still warm. The cellar feels like a bridge between seasons. You return to the hearth and watch as a woman ladles stew into a large bowl. She sets it on the table, and the rising steam blooms into the air. The bowl is heavy pottery thick enough to survive years of use. As she places it down, the bench creaks and someone laughs. You catch the warmth of the moment. The way sound in a small kitchen fills every corner, weaving itself into cracks in the walls until the whole space hums with simple joy. You hear someone slicing bread behind you. The crust cracks softly beneath the knife. The bread is dense, a little rough around the edges, but it releases warmth and steam instantly. You take a slice, feel its heat on your fingertips, and place it against your palm. The texture is comforting, a reminder of how even simple foods become luxuries when made with care. As the room fills with the sound of quiet conversation, you lean against the wall and allow yourself to feel how the kitchen becomes the heart of the season. Everyone drifts toward it. Everyone warms their hands here. Everyone finds comfort in the familiar cadence of cooking. The air grows thick with heat and scent and the faint buzz of anticipation as the holiday draws closer. You glance out the small window, where snow continues to fall silently. The flakes blur together in the dim afternoon light. You know you will step back into that cold soon enough. But for now, you remain in this warm cocoon of food, firelight, and the steady rhythm of hands preparing Christmas the way countless families have done before. You step outside again, letting the kitchen's gentle heat slip away as the winter evening presses against you. The air feels sharper than before, almost metallic, as if the cold has gained confidence. Snow settles lightly on your shoulders as you walk toward the woods that hover at the edge of the property. You follow a narrow path marked by footprints and the faint drag of a sled. Families in 1800s America often ventured into the forest to gather greenery for the holiday, and today you join them on that errand, boots crunching rhythmically as you move under branches heavy with frost. The sky hangs low in a pale gray sweep, softening the world. Your breath forms a small cloud ahead of you. You inhale pine cedar and the clean scent of untouched snow. You feel the silence deepen as you move deeper into the woods. This quiet is not empty. It hums with the tiny movements of winter birds, the rustle of squirrels, the distant crack of a frozen branch giving into its own weight. You reach a stand of evergreens towering above you, their tops dusted white, their trunks rising like ancient pillars. This is where families choose their Christmas greenery, Sometimes a full tree, sometimes boughs for garlands or wreaths, sometimes just a handful of branches tucked into corners of the home. One thing widely acknowledged by historians is that before mass-produced ornaments or electric lights decoration relied entirely on what the natural world offered. The forest storehouse is open year-round, but winter somehow makes its offerings feel enchanted. You place a hand on the nearest tree. The needles are cold and stiff beneath your fingers, their sharp points poking your glove just enough to remind you that nature here is not trying to be polite. Resin clings to your fingertips and carries a scent both sharp and sweet. You rub them together, letting the forest's perfume settle into your skin. You imagine how children of the time would race through these very woods, calling out candidates for the perfect Christmas tree, their voices bouncing off the trunks. You move around the tree line, looking at shapes and fullness. Some trees grow tall and elegant, but too thin to hold much decoration. Others look like they swallowed one too many winter storms and grew lopsided. You finally stop before one that looks promising. It is modest in size, not too wide, with a dense middle and branches that seem to reach for you. You tilt your head, imagining it inside a small parlor decorated with handmade strings of popcorn and berries. A lesser-known detail about the period is that some families coated pine branches with beaten egg whites and dusted them with sugar to imitate ice. The effect glittered softly in candlelight. You picture the tree shimmering as if coated with frost, even inside the warm glow of a home. Someone beside you lifts an axe. The blade gleams faintly in the dim light. You step back as they place the first strike at the base of the trunk. The sound echoes through the woods, a deep thud that shakes small clumps of snow loose from the branches above. The rhythm builds, chop pause, breath chop. You feel each impact reverberate through the ground. Finally, the tree leans, sighs, and falls in a gentle arc, resting softly on a bed of snow. The forest seems to exhale with it. You help lift the tree onto a small sled. The branches brush your cheek, leaving a trail of cold needles against your skin. The scent fills the air, rich and pure. As you begin to pull the sled, you realize how heavy the tree feels. Families often walked several miles to retrieve evergreens for Christmas. A scenic journey for you, a necessity for them. You lean your weight forward and tug, feeling the sled reluctant at first, then glide more easily over the snow. A faint debate from the world of historians flickers into your thoughts. Some researchers believe the custom of indoor Christmas trees spread mostly through German immigrant communities in the early 1800s, while others argue that scattered versions of the tradition appeared earlier in several regions evolving separately. The truth is a little tangled, much like the branches of the tree you are dragging. Traditions rarely follow straight lines. You continue down the path, pausing once to adjust the tree's position. Snowflakes cling to your scarf and settle in your eyelashes. The deeper scent of cedar wafts past on a passing wind, reminding you that the forest holds many kinds of greenery, each with its own holiday purpose. Some families preferred cedar boughs for their fragrance, others used holly or laurel where available. Still others formed wreaths filled with dried fruit cinnamon sticks or pine cones. As you walk, you notice a curious pattern in the snow. Someone earlier must have carried a bundle of greenery and left behind a faint trail of pine needles. Another little piece of seasonal trivia takes shape in your mind. Some farm animals, especially goats, were notorious for stealing wreaths or nibbling garlands when hung too low. Imagine a goat chewing up half the decorations the moment you turn your back. You smile, picturing one guilty creature with a sprig of holly dangling from its mouth, looking offended that anyone would object. When you reach the edge of the homestead, the world becomes warmer, more human. Smoke rises from chimneys, lanterns glow faintly behind frosted glass. You drag the tree toward the door, its weight suddenly feeling like an accomplishment. Someone opens the door and waves you inside. You step through, letting the warmth settle around you once more. Inside, the living room feels transformed by your arrival. The scent of evergreen fills the space, immediately meshing with wood smoke and the fading aroma of supper. A small table has been moved aside to make room for the tree. You lift it carefully, hold it steady while someone tightens the stand, then step back as it takes its place in the room. It looks humble, a little uneven, a bit wild around the edges, but perfect in its own way. You touch one branch gently. The needles prick your fingers. You imagine the decorations that will come next, Cranberry strings, bits of fabric, tin cutouts, candles placed carefully in holders so they do not drip wax everywhere. You feel a strange tenderness toward the tree, as though it is a guest in the home rather than decoration. The room glows a little brighter now. Firelight reflects off the glossy needles. Children gather around whispering ideas for how to decorate it. Adults smile, knowing the ritual brings comfort that stretches across generations. You stand quietly absorbing the moment. Bringing in the tree was a journey, a small adventure, a seasonal pilgrimage. And now the home feels more complete because of it. You settle onto a stool, watching as the family begins sorting decorations for later in the evening. The tree waits patiently, filling the room with its forest scent, promising a celebration shaped by nature tradition and the quiet magic of winter. You settle deeper into the room as the evening stretches out, the Christmas tree standing proudly nearby its branches, giving off that steady woodland perfume. The family shifts into a new rhythm now, one shaped by anticipation rather than chores. A small wooden box is placed on the table. Its hinges squeak softly as the lid opens, revealing not jewelry or treasure, but something far more meaningful in this century. Handmade gifts waiting to be finished, sorted, or wrapped in whatever scraps of paper or fabric the household can spare. You lean in, curious. The first thing you notice is a pair of knitted mittens, tiny and soft, the yarn uneven but warm. They are clearly made for a child, perhaps the little one who danced past you earlier. In 19th century America, the act of creating gifts was not a hobby. It was nearly unavoidable. Material goods were expensive, stores were far away, and most families relied on their own hands to build Christmas offerings. One well-established detail of the era is that simple, practical presents were the norm. Clothing tools, toys carved from leftover wood, small books, perhaps a tin whistle, or a cloth doll. Each gift held time rather than money. You pick up a cloth doll resting in the box. Its face is stitched with faint, uneven lines. Tiny blue eyes stare calmly upward, and its yarn hair has been braided into two short plaits. You touch its cheek and feel the subtle roughness of a homespun fabric. A lesser-known detail comes to mind. Many families use leftover flour sacks to make toy bodies. The fabric was sturdy, washable, and often decorated with printed patterns. Once manufacturers realized, families repurposed them. Dolls like this carried faint ghost patterns from the sacks. They came from a hidden history tucked under tiny dresses. The box holds more treasures. A wooden horse carved from a single block, its legs a bit chunky, its tail chipped slightly at the end. You run your thumb over the carving marks. Someone clearly shaped it by lamplight, maybe after a long day of farm labor, squinting at the wood while sitting near the fire. The surface smells faintly of pine. The wheels attached to the bottom are simple slices of a branch, smoothed just enough to roll across a floorboard without snagging. You imagine the delighted clatter it will make on Christmas morning. A woman at the table begins wrapping a gift. She places the object inside a square of newspaper, folds the edges carefully, and ties it with twine. No glossy paper, no swirling ribbons, just simple materials arranged with quiet intention. You watch her fingers move. There's something almost meditative in the way she knots the string. She tucks the package into a basket with others that are already prepared. A knitted scarf, a jar of preserves, a small book of hymns with its corners worn soft from use. As you watch, you hear soft murmurs from the next room. A family member is testing a toy instrument, adjusting its sound. The faint notes drift into the room like delicate snowflakes. You listen and smile. Gifts in the 1800s were often homemade musical toys, simple flutes, or small fiddles whittled from scraps. Children did not expect abundance. They expected thoughtfulness, and even the smallest item carried the weight of affection. Your eyes drift to the table again, where the woman is now sorting through small, polished stones. They glimmer faintly in the lamplight. She places them into a pouch made from leftover fabric. You raise an eyebrow. Stones. She sees your curiosity and explains quietly that children sometimes treasured marbles made from clay or smooth stones polished in riverbeds. They played with them endlessly in circles drawn on wooden floors or frozen ground outside. One ongoing academic discussion touches lightly on whether such simple toys served mostly as playthings or as early teaching tools for counting and sorting. The nature of childhood was evolving in the 19th century, and scholars still weigh how much these humble objects shaped young minds. You reach for an item wrapped in cloth at the back of the wooden box. Inside you find a tiny embroidered pouch, smelling faintly of dried lavender. The scent rises instantly, soothing and calm. You imagine this being placed under a pillow or tucked into a drawer. Tiny sachets like this were popular small gifts, especially among households that grew herbs in window boxes or gardens. Lavender, mint, sage, rose petals, all dried during the summer and stitched into pouches when winter came. The family continues their quiet work. Someone sits near the fire, sewing a patch onto a wool cap. Another person sands a small wooden object, smoothing its edges. You sit among them, listening to the gentle scrape of sandpaper, the soft hiss of the fire, the rhythmic clack of knitting needles. The room glows with warm amber light that turns every movement into something tender. You notice a young boy at the far end of the table, concentrating intensely. He's carving something small, delicate. You move closer. It is a whistle shaped from a hollow branch. He glances up, proud but shy, and explains that he is making it for his younger sister. You admire the whistle, noticing how carefully he cuts each notch. The wood curls away in thin ribbons that fall to the floor like shavings of pale snow. It is a gift, made not just with skill, but with sibling affection. Someone laughs gently at the other end of the room as they attempt to wrap an oddly shaped gift folding paper around it in ways that do not entirely make sense. The laughter warms the room even further. In a century where life is often harsh, moments like this shine bright. You sense how holiday giving becomes less about objects and more about stitching together relationships that are tested daily by weatherwork and distance. As you look around, you see another gift tucked in the corner. A tiny hand-painted card drawn on stiff paper. The image is simple, showing a candle and a sprig of evergreen. Cards like this were not yet mass-produced in most regions, so families made their own. A brush dipped in ink or watercolor, a bit of time, and a steady hand. You pick up the card gently. The paint strokes feel slightly raised under your fingertips. Nearby sits a small jar filled with what looks like candy. You peer closer and see tiny drops of homemade sugar candy hardened from boiled molasses or maple syrup. They glisten softly. Someone must have spent hours stirring the mixture over the fire, watching for it to thicken, then spooning it onto a cold surface to harden. Such sweets were modest but cherished. Children would savor them slowly, letting each piece dissolve on the tongue. You lean back in your chair and breathe in the mixture of scents swirling through the room. Wood smoke, evergreen cloves, clean wool, drying paint, and that faint sweetness from the candy jar. It feels like a tapestry of winter comforts woven together. Gifts here are not distractions. They're extensions of the everyday skills families rely on, transformed briefly into tokens of affection. As the last gifts are wrapped, the family clears the table, each person carrying something away to hide until morning. You help gather scraps of twine and fold the leftover newspaper, placing it neatly aside. The room grows quieter, settling again into that familiar winter stillness. The tree stands patiently in the corner, waiting for decorations. The gifts rest in secret corners of the house, tucked behind quilts or under beds. You feel the warmth of the fire on your back. Outside, the wind continues to sweep across the landscape, but inside the home glows with a sense of completion. Tomorrow will bring celebration, but tonight belongs to preparation care and the gentle ritual of giving shaped not by extravagance, but by devotion. You hear laughter before you see anyone. It spills through the hallway like warm light, drawing you toward a small gathering already forming inside the neighboring home. You step inside and instantly feel the change in atmosphere. The house feels alive in a way evenings rarely allow during the rest of the year. Where most winter nights are quiet and practical, this one shimmers with anticipation. People shrug off coats dusted with snow, boots thump against the floor. Someone shakes out a scarf while another pours warm cider into mismatched cups. The room feels fuller than its walls were designed for. Voices overlap, chairs scrape softly across the floor as guests settle in. A fiddle leans against the arm of a chair, waiting for its moment. A plate of ginger cookies sits on a small table, their surfaces cracked from heat and sprinkled lightly with coarse sugar. You take one and feel the crisp edge break beneath your fingers. The scent of ginger and molasses floats upward, making the room feel even warmer. Community gatherings during the holiday season are something older Americans considered vital. People depended on neighbors, on shared labor, on borrowed tools, and exchanged news. Social life did not flourish online or through screens. It flourished right here, in parlor rooms lit by candle stubs and firelight. A well-known detail of the period is that many holiday evenings included group singing, storytelling, and parlor games that encouraged both charm and embarrassment. You take a seat near the fire and prepare to witness the small theater of rural celebration. A man near the hearth clears his throat dramatically as though preparing to command a stage. He launches into a story about a stubborn mule that refused to cross a frozen creek. The audience groans and chuckles in familiar anticipation. This is clearly one of his favorite tales, repeated every year. A woman beside him rolls her eyes with affection. As he speaks, his arms wave the air, his gestures broad and earnest. Children gather near his feet, their faces tipped upward, their eyes wide, willing themselves to believe every moment. You lean in, too, even though part of you suspects the mule grows more dramatic each retelling. When the story finishes, applause fills the room. A young woman picks up the fiddle and tunes it lightly, plucking at the strings. She begins a quick, lively tune. Guests tap their feet. A few attempt to dance, but the room is too crowded for anything graceful. Instead, they shuffle in place, laughing as they bump elbows. Someone claps in time, and the rhythm carries across the whole house, turning the flickering firelight into something that feels alive. While the music rises, you notice a side table holding an assortment of holiday treats. Small cakes, baked apples, and a tin filled with peppermint sticks. You pick up one of the apples, warm and soft, its skin pulling away slightly. You bite into it, tasting the sweetness mingle with cinnamon. A less familiar custom of the era whispers through your memory. Some communities made spiced drinks by heating cider with egg yolks whisked in. The result was a thick velvety mixture called flip that was served warm. You spot a jug near the stove and wonder if it contains that very concoction. As you turn your attention back to the gathering, someone announces it's time for games. A groan sweeps the room, half playful, half anticipatory. Traditional winter games often push people into awkward, delightful situations. Blindfolded guest games, shadow charades, tongue twisters, or even forfeits where losers perform silly tasks while the audience cheers. Tonight, they choose a game involving a hat placed in the center of the room. One person must walk around it blindfolded while others call directions to keep them from stumbling into furniture. The cacophony of warnings, laughs, and dramatic near collisions shakes the walls. You watch a boy collide with a chair and nearly fall. He lifts the blindfold just enough to glare at his older sister, who had been directing him into danger on purpose. Their bickering sparks more laughter from the rest of the room. You catch yourself smiling. These games, though simple, bind people together in memorable ways. Someone in the corner picks up a book of poems, clears their throat, and reads aloud. The room quiets. The poem speaks of winter fields, long twilights, and the hope of spring. The words drift into the rafters and settle gently over everyone present. You feel the stillness that follows a kind of shared breath, as if the group collectively acknowledges the hardships of winter and the comfort of being together. One ongoing debate among cultural historians revolves around the true purpose of these winter gatherings. Some argue they were meant to preserve morale during harsh seasons, while others believe they functioned as informal social networks that reinforced community identity. Listening to the poem echo off the walls, you suspect both arguments hold truth. The quiet moment dissolves as someone calls out for more music. The fiddle begins again, this time softer, a tune that feels like a lullaby. The room sways with it. Couples lean closer. Children curl up against their parents. You let your eyes close for a moment, letting the melody wrap around you like a warm shawl. After the music winds down, people begin circulating once more, sharing stories and news. You catch fragments of conversation, someone complaining about frozen pipes, someone praising a neighbor's carpentry, someone mentioning the recent arrival of a new baby in town. These exchanges serve as the community's heartbeat. Information spreads swiftly, even in the depths of winter. Near the far wall, a woman offers you a cup filled with steaming wassail. The mixture smells of apples, cloves, and citrus. You sip it slowly, letting the warmth slide through your chest. Wassail has many variations, often used both as a beverage and as part of door-to-door singing traditions. Some households even bless their orchards with it, wishing for a fruitful harvest. You taste that intention in every sip. A small commotion draws your attention to a group gathered around a parlor table. They're passing around a handcrafted puzzle made from interlocking wooden shapes. Each person tries to assemble it into a perfect square, but fails repeatedly. You give it an attempt. The pieces feel smooth and cool in your hands. You twist them, flip them, rotate them, but the solution remains stubbornly elusive. Puzzles like this were common entertainment in the 19th century, often exchanged as small seasonal gifts. Your failure earns sympathetic chuckles from nearby guests. The night grows deeper. Shadows stretch across the room as candles burn low. Someone adds another log to the fire. Sparks leap upward and vanish in the chimney. The heat expands and fills the space again. The crowd feels cozier, as though the evening has wrapped itself around everyone present. Children begin falling asleep where they sit, heads resting on laps, arms tucked into wool shawls. Adults lower their voices to softer tones. Conversations drift into gentle murmurs. You feel that familiar heaviness of a night settling into itself. The chaos of games and stories fades into a warm afterglow. Someone begins humming a tune. A few others join softly. It is not a performance now, just a gentle harmony weaving through the embers. The kind of song meant to comfort rather than impress. You sip the last of your wassail and let the sound seep into you. As the gathering winds down, guests begin slipping into coats again. They offer farewells, promises to visit soon, wishes for warmth and luck. Snow greets them outside, swirling in slow spirals as they step into the night. You linger a moment longer, letting the last traces of laughter and music settle inside you. You step out into the cold, too, the door closing behind you with a soft click. The night feels different now, not emptier, but fuller, as if the companionship inside still radiates gently into the darkness. You pull your coat close and follow the snow-packed path toward the next stretch of your journey. The communal warmth clings to you like a hidden ember, guiding you deeper into the story of the season. You leave the warmth of the busy gathering behind and follow a narrow track that leads into the quieter reaches of the countryside. The air feels sharper out here, almost untouched. The houses grow farther apart until only the silhouette of one lonely cabin stands ahead of you, its chimney breathing a thin ribbon of smoke into the dark sky. You crunch through the snow toward it, knowing this is where many American families spent their holidays in the early 19th century alone, self-reliant and surrounded by miles of rugged land. Life on the frontier shaped Christmas in ways very different from the towns you have just visited. As you approach the cabin, the rough logs glow faintly from the fire inside. You hear a single creak from the porch as the wind pushes against it. Families living this far from neighbors often built their homes with their own hands. According to accounts from settlers of the time, such cabins rarely exceeded 1 or 2 rooms, and every inch of space served multiple purposes. Bedrooms merged with storage areas, kitchens blended into living spaces. The entire home felt like a pocket of warmth carved out of a relentless wilderness. You push open the door and step inside. A gust of warm, pine-scented air washes over you. The logs crack in the fireplace. A pot hangs low above the embers, simmering with a mixture of dried peas and salted meat. The aroma fills the entire room. A man at the table looks up and nods quietly. He sharpens a small knife, dragging it across a whetstone in slow, precise strokes. A woman stands beside the hearth, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon that has clearly been used for years, perhaps decades. The cabin's walls are lined with shelves holding jars of dried plants, bunches of herbs, and sacks of grain that rustle when the wind presses too hard against the cabin's outer wall. You sit on a stool near the fire. Your hands warm instantly, and you feel the deep fatigue that frontier families must have known intimately. They worked from before dawn, until after dusk, chopping wood, carrying water, mending fences, gathering food. Even during holidays, the rhythm of survival could not be paused. A well-recognized historical pattern of the era is that the frontier demanded constant readiness. Winter storms could turn chores into emergencies without warning. You glance around and notice how everything in the cabin invites ingenuity. A kettle is repurposed as a storage pot for spare nails. A cradle hangs suspended from the ceiling on ropes to keep it away from cold drafts near the floor. A jacket dries on a line stretched above the hearth, warming slowly in the rising heat. Each object feels like it has been transformed at least twice from its original purpose. A little-known practice that sometimes surprises modern readers is that families often stuffed animal hides or moss between the log beams to keep the home insulated. If you run your fingers along the wall, you can feel the uneven texture of these natural fillers, soft in some places, rough in others. The woman near the fire gestures for you to join them at the table. You sit while she pours hot broth into a tin cup. The metal is chipped but sturdy. You take a sip, feeling warmth spread all the way into your chest. The man sets down his knife and slides a wooden carving toward you. It is a tiny figurine unfinished, shaped like a bear standing on its hind legs. He explains quietly that such small carvings are common frontier gifts made during the few spare moments winter allows. Different historians interpret these carvings in various ways. Some argue they served as toys for children, while others suggest they symbolize the animals settlers depended on or feared. The truth likely varies from cabin to cabin, shaped by personal stories and local wildlife. The flickering light from the fireplace casts long shadows across the room. The noise outside grows softer, smothered by the snow. The isolation of the place wraps around you, not entirely unfriendly, but undeniably intense. Families who lived in such remote areas often developed holiday traditions shaped by whatever environment offered. They gathered evergreen branches from the forest, not only to decorate, but also to freshen the air indoors as long winters could leave the cabin musty. They crafted ornaments from bits of tin scraps of fabric and feathers found near the homestead. They prepared celebratory meals from whatever they had managed to store. Dried apples, smoked venison, cornbread baked on a flat stone. No excess, just honest resourcefulness. A girl in a simple wool dress sits beside a small window, sewing something with stiff, careful stitches. You move closer and discover she's making a pouch decorated with red thread. She plans to gift it to her older brother, she tells you. Inside, she will place a handful of dried berries saved from the autumn harvest. You smile at her devotion and at the thoughtfulness behind such a small but meaningful offering. Gifts on the frontier were rarely surprising, but always heartfelt. A young boy sits cross-legged on the floor, tracing letters in the dust with a stick. He looks up shyly when he notices your gaze. The family keeps a single book on a shelf, a Bible worn at the edges. Literacy was not universal in remote regions, and families sometimes relied on the most educated member of the household to teach others how to read and write during the winter months when daylight stretched longer indoors than out. You sense that the boy's tracing is both play and practice, a small step toward a future skill. The man rises from the table and retrieves something wrapped in cloth from a chest in the corner. He unwraps it to reveal a small metal lantern. Even though he lights it only on special nights, it becomes the centerpiece of holiday evenings. The lantern glows with a soft, muted flame, casting steady light that feels different from the flickering kitchen fire. Lanterns like this gave families a sense of ceremony, marking Christmas Eve or Christmas Day as moments apart from ordinary time. The woman places a simple cake on the table. Its surface is browned and dotted with bits of dried fruit. You cut a slice and feel the dense weight of it. She explains with modest pride that she saved enough sugar this year to make it sweeter than usual. Sugar in remote places was expensive and difficult to transport, often stored for months before being used in winter celebrations. The taste feels warm and earthy, carrying hints of nutmeg and maybe a whisper of cinnamon. You take another bite, slowly, letting it linger. A soft tapping at the door interrupts the meal. The family freezes for a moment, exchanging cautious glances. Visitors are rare in such remote places. The man rises and opens the door to reveal a neighbor arriving by lantern light. Snow coats his shoulders and his beard is frosted with ice crystals. He steps inside, offering quiet greetings. The sudden presence of another human in this isolated world feels like an unexpected gift. He carries something wrapped in cloth, a small jar of honey. He places it on the table with a nod. Honey is precious here, and sharing it during the holiday speaks to the deep trust and mutual reliance required to survive frontier winters. The family makes space for the visitor who sits near the fire, rubbing warmth back into his hands. He tells a short story about spotting wolf tracks near the creek earlier that day. The girl pauses her sewing. The boy lifts his eyes from the dust. You listen closely, feeling the edge of the wilderness press in again. He assures them the wolves kept their distance, but the story lingers like a reminder that life on the frontier always balances between beauty and danger. As the evening deepens, conversation becomes softer. The fire burns lower, glowing deeper red. The wind slides along the cabin walls with a hushed persistence. The visitor buttons his coat, preparing to walk home under a sky salted with stars. The family sends him off with a small pouch of dried beans for his journey, an exchange built on mutual need rather than ceremony. You sit a while longer, letting the quiet sink into you. Christmas on the frontier feels different from the gatherings you've seen before. It is stripped down, honest, forged in resilience. Joy grows from resourcefulness and from the comforting presence of loved ones in a world that demands constant strength. Eventually, you rise and step back outside. The landscape spreads before you, vast and silent. Snow reflects the dim moonlight. The cabin behind you glows faintly, a small ember in an enormous night. You walk on, carrying with you the warmth of those who make celebration out of scarcity and connection out of isolation. You follow a winding, snow-packed road until the loneliness of the frontier gives way to something new. The land begins to thicken with buildings. Lamps flicker through windows. Voices drift through the cold air. Before long, you feel the unmistakable energy of a 19th century American city unfolding around you. It is not a city as you know it today with towering buildings and constant motion, but it is lively in its own developing way. Horses clatter along cobblestones, carriage wheels grind faintly, street vendors try to keep warm by stamping their boots and blowing on their hands. You step onto a wider street lined with shops, their windows glow with warm lamplight, and inside you see shelves filled with goods far more varied than anything available out on the frontier. The air smells of roasted chestnuts sold by a vendor standing beside a small brazier. He waves smoke from his face and calls out prices that seem almost modest compared to modern standards, but feel extravagant for many families of the time. Cities in this era were gathering points for immigrants arriving from Europe, and their traditions quickly wove themselves into the fabric of American Christmas. Recorded accounts from the mid-1800s show that holiday markets in cities grew more diverse each year as communities brought their regional customs and foods into public spaces. You move closer to one of the storefronts. Behind the glass, it's a modest display tin toys, painted wooden blocks, simple dolls with porcelain faces, a few small books, and one or two candlesticks wrapped with red ribbons. Nothing like the overwhelming abundance of modern retail, but still impressive for the century. A small sign advertises oranges, imported from warmer climates. You lean closer, taking in the bright color. Fresh fruit in winter was a luxury, and families with a little extra money often bought oranges as holiday treats. Some remembered receiving a single orange in their stocking as one of the highlights of Christmas morning. A wagon rattles past you, piled high with evergreen trees bound in twine. The driver shouts jovially to someone across the street. Tree sellers were becoming a common sight in growing cities during the mid-century. Residents no longer needed to venture into forests to cut down their own. Instead, they could purchase them along crowded streets, the smell of pine creating an island of woodland scent in the middle of brick and stone. A lesser-known note from old newspaper reports mentions that some early vendors sprinkled their trees with water before nightfall, so the morning frost would make them sparkle, hoping the glittering branches would catch more customers. You turn down a narrower street. Music drifts out of a tavern where a handful of men sing a mixture of folk tunes and hymns. Their voices spill into the evening air, not entirely harmonious, but enthusiastic. The doorway glows warmly, and for a moment you linger there. The tavern is crowded, cheeks flushed from warmth and drink. Two women sit near the window with needlework in their laps, chatting in low tones while passing travelers filter in and out. For many working-class families, city taverns doubled as social hubs where news was shared, work was found, and seasonal cheer bubbled up despite limited resources. You slip farther along the street where groups of children chase one another, leaving tracks in the snow. They gang up on a boy carrying a basket of apples, teasing him until he breaks into a laugh and tosses each of them one. Their joy echoes across the alleyway. You catch a glimpse of a decorated shop sign with holly tucked around its edges. It sways gently in the wind, creaking faintly. In city spaces, decorations often blended shopkeepers' marketing with genuine celebration, a blend that seemed to grow each year. Some cultural commentators of the period suggested that early urban Christmases helped transform the season into a more public display rather than a strictly home-based ritual. Others insisted the shift stemmed more from immigration patterns than commerce. The discussion continues among modern researchers trying to trace the roots of American holiday culture. The sounds of the city gather around you like a chorus. Streetcar bells ring, dogs bark, vendors call out for customers to purchase ribbons, fish, or baked goods. A baker stands at his doorway offering warm bread to passers-by. You accept a piece, feeling its soft heat radiate through your gloves. The aroma is heavenly rich with butter and yeast. City bakeries were often some of the busiest places during the holiday season. Many families lacked proper ovens in their own homes, especially those living in cramped tenement apartments. They relied on neighborhood bakers to prepare cakes and pies for festive meals. Nearby, a small stand sells roasted nuts wrapped in paper cones. The vendor sprinkles them with a mixture of spices and sugar. You take a cone and feel the warmth seep through the paper. When you bring one to your lips, the crunch echoes in your ears. Sweetness blooms on your tongue, a welcome contrast to the cold air. These stands were a popular treat in busy districts, especially where crowds gathered in the evenings. You continue toward a more crowded block of the city. There, a small group of carolers stands beneath a gas lamp, their breath forming clouds as they sing. Their voices blend with surprising harmony. The oldest holds a lantern in one hand and a songbook in the other. A little girl in the group clutches mittens that are clearly too large for her, but she sings bravely anyway. People stop to listen. Some drop coins into a tin cup at their feet. Caroling became increasingly common throughout the century as communities adopted customs from Europe and molded them into their own variations. Children from poorer neighborhoods sometimes caroled as a way to earn money for small holiday gifts or warm food. A few blocks away, you hear the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Even during the holidays, work does not vanish. Sparks fly from the open doorway of the smithy, scattering like tiny stars. A horse stamps outside, impatient for its shoe to be fitted. The heat from the forge brushes your face as you pass, and for a moment you're grateful for its brief embrace of warmth. You make your way toward a busy market square where dozens of people huddle beneath awnings and stalls. Merchants sell thread candles, dried fruit ribbons, and simple toys. Voices overlap, coins clink, lanterns sway overhead, casting golden halos through the cold. You drift among the stalls, listening, watching, absorbing the tangle of accents from Irish, German, Scottish, and English immigrants who weave their traditions into the marketplace. You stop at a stall displaying handcrafted tin ornaments shaped like stars, hearts, and little animals. The vendor demonstrates how the ornaments glint in candlelight. You pick one up. The metal feels cold and surprisingly light. Crafts like these reflected the growing influence of urban artisans who made a living producing items too delicate or intricate for rural families to craft at home. A young woman standing beside you smiles and explains that she plans to purchase one for her family's tree. She tells you her parents arrived from Germany a decade ago and brought with them a tradition of placing candles on the branches of their Christmas evergreen. She admits she's always nervous about it catching fire. The vendor laughs and assures her that tin ornaments help reflect the light, making the tree glow more brightly without needing too many candles. You sense how immigrant traditions shift and merge in this bustling environment, each family adjusting old customs to new conditions. Nearby, a Salvation Army-style charity table offers warm soup to those who cannot afford a full meal. At the edge of the square, a crowd forms around a man reading aloud from a newspaper delivering updates from distant places. Children drift close, fascinated by his voice. This is how news travels in a society without mass broadcasting. Stories and reports carry through public reading, neighbors sharing snippets and people retelling what they heard earlier in the day. A moment of quiet catches you by surprise. Snow begins to fall again, soft and steady. The flakes drift through lamplight like glowing feathers. People tilt their faces upward. A child sticks out their tongue to catch a few. The city seems to hush just for a breath, as if taking in its own beauty. You take one more walk through the streets. The sounds resume. Laughter spills from the bakery. Horses snort and shuffle. The smell of pine mingles with smoke from chimneys. Christmas in the city feels fuller, louder, more complex than in rural places. It carries a blend of immigrant heritage, early commercial energy, neighborhood traditions, and hopeful celebration. As you step away from the market square, the lamps behind you flicker in the snowfall. You breathe in the air, thick with the sense of roasted nuts, bakery bread, and evergreen. The city hums around you, alive with the pulse of holiday spirit, and you continue onward, ready to step into the next turn of the season. You leave behind the noise and bustle of the city and step into a quieter district where the streets grow narrower and the glow from windows softens into something steadier, almost reverent. The snow underfoot crunches more softly here, packed down by early morning churchgoers who made their way along the same path. You follow their footprints toward a modest wooden building at the end of the street. Its bell tower rises above the snow like a finger pointing into the pale winter sky. A warm amber light spills through the cracks around the door. You approach slowly, sensing that this place holds the heart of many families' Christmas rituals. When you slip inside, a hush settles over you instantly. The church is lit by dozens of beeswax candles arranged in iron holders. Their flames sway gently, casting golden halos on the wooden pews. The air smells faintly of pine branches placed along the walls and the lingering smoke from the stove that warms the sanctuary. People sit wrapped in shawls and coats, their breaths still faintly visible from the cold outside. For many families in the 19th century, attending a Christmas service was the central event of the season. Records from the time show that church attendance increased significantly around holidays as the day took on growing cultural importance. You sit on a bench near the back. The wood feels smooth, worn down by years of hands and winter coats sliding across it. A family sits a few rows ahead of you. Children fidget quietly, tracing patterns on the pew railings with mittened fingers. An older woman adjusts a small hymn book with delicate care. The pastor stands near the stove, greeting members of the congregation as they enter, offering gentle handshakes and warm nods. You notice something simple yet striking. Evergreen boughs hang from the rafters, but they are not decorated. No ribbons, no shiny ornaments, just greenery gathered from the nearby woods. Such decorations were common at many churches of the time, not for ornamentation, but for symbolism. Pine represented endurance during winter, a reminder that life persisted even in the bare months. One documented practice from certain regions was to weave a large wreath and hang it near the pulpit for the duration of the holiday week. In some towns, this wreath became a cherished tradition passed down through several generations. The pastor steps forward, clearing his throat softly. His voice rises in a low, steady tone as he begins the service. He reads from Scripture, but his words drift beyond religion and into the shared hardships of winter, the importance of unity and the comfort of gathering together. People listen with leaning bodies, their faces lit by candlelight. You feel the quiet weight of the moment, as if the entire room breathes in unison. A small choir stands near the front, 4 women and 1 older man holding a pitch pipe. He blows a gentle note and the voices begin. Their harmony is simple and unembellished, but achingly beautiful in the stillness. The notes tremble slightly at first, then grow stronger, filling the sanctuary with a soft glow that seems to pulse with the candlelight. Music in churches during this era varied widely by denomination. Some congregations embraced lively hymns, while others favored quiet, contemplative songs sung in near whisper. Contemporary writings reveal that what counted as appropriate holiday music sparked spirited disagreement among communities. Some welcomed the influence of European carols, while others viewed them with suspicion or preferred strictly local traditions. Listening now, you can imagine how such differing views took root. A teenage boy stands to read a passage. His hands shake the paper, rustling softly, but his voice carries well. He pauses once to clear his throat, cheeks reddening, and the congregation smiles in sympathy. Public speaking was often considered an important skill in rural and city churches alike, and young members were sometimes encouraged to participate in holiday services as a way to build confidence and contribute to the gathering. The candles near you flicker more intensely as someone opens a window slightly to release some of the heat gathering in the room. A draft slips through, brushing cold air along your shoulders. The chill mixes with the smell of pine and beeswax and something earthy, perhaps the wool from coats drying by the stove. You pull your collar closer as the choir begins a new carol, one that you recognize faintly, though the melody is slower and older than the version you know. A mother near the aisle bends to straighten her child's scarf. The child whispers something and points toward the front. There are a few simple decorations rest along the pulpit. A wooden nativity carved roughly but lovingly, a lantern with an unusually warm glow, and a plate of apples left as a gift for anyone who might need one. In some congregations, fruit and small food offerings were placed at the front of the church to be distributed to poorer families after the service. Diaries from the time mention how children sometimes counted on this fruit as a rare, sweet treat during the winter. The pastor invites the congregation to join in the next hymn. People rise slowly, the rustle of wool skirts and coats filling the room. You stand as well. The music begins quietly, then builds as more voices join. You hear hesitations off keynotes, soft hummed harmonies. It is imperfect, but the sincerity makes it beautiful. The coldness outside seems to fade as the sound rises, filling the rafters. As the hymn ends, the pastor steps forward once more. He speaks briefly about gratitude, about caring for neighbors during winter, about the hope that springs from shared struggle. He mentions that several families in the congregation have lost livestock or endured illness, and encourages everyone to look after one another in the coming weeks. His words reflect a truth of the era. Mutual aid was not only a moral ideal, but a practical necessity for survival. When he pauses, the sanctuary holds a silence so deep you can almost hear the candles breathing. After the benediction, the congregation begins to gather their things. Shawls or wrapped hats replaced mittens tugged on. Children bounce in place, eager to return to the cold world outside, where snow offers new possibilities for play. Adults linger to exchange greetings, ask about relatives, or share small pieces of local news. A few step forward to the pulpit, take fruit from the plate, and tuck it into their pockets. You walk toward the door as the last notes of conversation float behind you. When you step outside, the world feels freshly washed by snowfall. The white air glows under lantern light. A few families walk ahead of you, their boots crunching in steady rhythm. You follow them down the street, letting the peacefulness of the service linger around you like a warm shawl. Christmas morning in this century begins not with gifts or glittering displays, but with candlelit, quiet, shared voices, and the sense that even in the darkest months, people find ways to bring light into the room. You leave the church behind, its warm glow fading into the snowy distance as you continue along a path that winds between homes, workshops, and small barns. The air's crisp enough to sting your cheeks, and the faint scent of wood smoke drifts from every direction. The morning service has ended, but the day itself is far from over. In 19th century America, Christmas is a brief pause in a long season of work, not a full day of leisure. Even on the holiday, the rhythm of daily life presses forward with a steadiness you can feel in every footstep. You enter a farmhouse yard where chickens scratch at frozen ground, their feathers puffed against the cold. A cow in the nearby barn shifts restlessly, steam rising from its breath. The animals do not wait for celebration. They demand care on every day of the year, regardless of weather, mood, or tradition. Diaries kept by farmers during this era frequently mentioned the tension between wanting to enjoy the holiday and knowing that livestock still needed feeding, milking, or checking for illness. To ignore chores would invite disaster, especially in winter. A man in a thick wool coat walks across the yard carrying a bucket of feed. He nods at you as he passes the bucket swinging heavily at his side. You follow him into the barn where warm, damp air envelops you. The scent of hay animals and earth forms a comforting mixture that settles your breath. He pours grain into troughs while the animals gather around, nudging one another impatiently. You watch him work, the motions practiced and efficient. Even on Christmas morning, routines like this anchor the family's survival. A woman arrives with a bundle of dry straw for bedding. She shakes out the bundle with a soft rustling sound, creating a fresh layer of insulation for the animals. She smiles at you, brushing hay from her sleeves. She tells you that on holidays they sometimes give the animals slightly sweeter fodder as a small seasonal treat. This practice appears in scattered personal letters from the period where writers describe saving a bit of better feed for Christmas Day, believing it a gesture of gratitude toward the creatures that sustain the family. Back outside, you notice a young boy hauling firewood toward the house. His breath puffs with each step, and his boots leave small craters in the snow. He drops the load beside the door, then wipes his brow with a mittened hand. The demand for fuel never lessens in winter. Fires must be fed constantly, especially on cold days. Families often spend enormous amounts of time chopping, stacking, and carrying wood. A fact often emphasized in rural accounts is that running out of dry firewood was not an inconvenience, but a danger. Frostbite, illness, and spoiled food could follow quickly if fires waned. The boy's father calls him back into the woodshed for one more task. Inside, you see tools hanging on the wall, axes, saws, and wedges used throughout the season. Some tools shine from regular upkeep, others carry nicks that tell stories of hard work. A small detail that rarely appears in school books is that families often sharpened axes during winter evenings as a shared activity. One person held the tool steady, another handled the grindstone, and sometimes children joined just to feel included. These sharpening circles acted as both chore and conversation time, weaving work into togetherness. From the shed, you return to the house, where the woman you saw earlier now tends a kettle simmering on the stove. She stirs it with slow, thoughtful movements. Inside is a mixture of potatoes and onions, simmering into a simple soup for midday. She explains that Christmas meals, especially in modest households, were often spread throughout the day rather than presented as one grand feast. Tasks were woven between food preparations, everything unfolded gradually. A small girl sits at the kitchen table peeling apples with careful concentration. The apples are not fresh, but dried slices rehydrated for cooking. She talks softly about wanting to help her mother finish chores quickly, so there will be time for games later. Her earnestness warms the room. He notices the small pile of curlings building beside her, their scent gentle and sweet. Her mother nods in agreement. She mentions that while some families tried to minimize labor on the holiday, many could not. Winter required constant attention. Frozen pumps, stubborn fires, and heavy snowfall waited for no one. Even inside the house, countless duties persisted. Someone had to wash dishes, keep the floors swept of ashmen torn clothing, and maintain the fire. In many households, women bore these responsibilities year-round, holiday or not. Yet letters from the era often describe how people tried to lighten the mood by singing while they worked or by completing chores earlier than usual so the evening could feel restful. You watch as the woman opens the stove door, revealing the soft orange glow inside. She adjusts the log, sending a swirl of sparks upward. The warmth washes over you. She wipes her hands on her apron and begins mixing flour in a large bowl, preparing dough for biscuits that will accompany the soup. The rhythm of her movement seems almost meditative. She works quickly but not hurriedly, maintaining a steady calm that fills the room. Outside, you hear the scrape of a shovel against ice. A teenage boy is clearing the walkway to prevent accidents. Snowstorms were frequent in this era, and clearing paths was a matter of safety. Letters written by travelers often describe slipping on icy steps or trudging through knee-deep drifts while visiting family on Christmas Day. Watching the boy work, you feel a renewed respect for the hidden labor beneath holiday cheer. The boy pauses long enough to wave at an older neighbor who is struggling to carry a sack of flour into his house. Without hesitation, the teen jogs over to help him. On the frontier, and in small towns alike, neighbors often supported one another during holidays. This spirit of mutual care appears constantly in the records of the period. People lent flour, exchanged firewood, shared meals, and delivered small bundles to families who were ill or struggling. Even in cities, charitable acts became more visible in winter months. Someone approaches you from the barn. It is the father again, wearing a coat with patches at the elbows. He offers you a small tin cup filled with warm milk straight from the morning milking. You sip it carefully. The taste is rich and comforting. He wipes his hands on a cloth and mentions that even on Christmas, he rises before dawn to care for the farm. He shrugs as if the idea needs no explanation. Work is simply part of life, and in winter it grows sharper, more demanding. Inside the house, the younger children now gather pine branches to sweep the floors, a small tradition in some areas, where evergreen scents were believed to freshen the air and even ward off illness. The needles scatter across the wooden boards, releasing a clean, resinous smell. You help guide the branches toward a basket. The task is light, but the children treat it as important, taking quiet pride in contributing. You glance toward a small shelf where a single clock ticks faintly. Its steady rhythm fills the pauses between footfalls and soft conversations. Time in this century drifts according to daylight chores and the pulse of the fire, not digital reminders. The clock marks noon, though the dim winter sun outside makes it difficult to believe. The soup is ready. The family gathers around the table, but even as they sit, you can sense their awareness of unfinished tasks. The father must check the fences before nightfall. The teenage boy has water to haul. Someone needs to trek to a neighbor's house to deliver baked goods. The girl must finish folding laundry. Christmas grants them warmth, music, and small indulgences, but not freedom from responsibility. You eat with them, sharing the simple meal. The warmth fills your stomach. Conversation drifts from weather to neighbors to plans for later that evening. They speak of visiting another household for songs and stories. You listen, admiring how seamlessly they weave work and celebration together. The day is not divided into chores and pleasure. Both flow through each other. After the meal, the father stands and stretches, then disappears into the snowy yard again. You follow him outside. The afternoon light rests low on the horizon, casting lavender shadows across the snow. He walks toward the fence line, scanning for damage. His boots crunch steadily. You notice a small charm tied to one of the gate posts. It's a dried apple slice fastened with twine, something he explains was placed there last winter after a fox repeatedly bothered the chickens. Whether it served as superstition decoration or simply a child's forgotten craft, he cannot say. Researchers exploring rural customs sometimes point out that many households blended practicality with symbolic gestures. You sense that the meaning of such objects shifts from year to year, shaped by memory more than rule. As the sun dips lower, you return with him to the house. The day's labor continues around you, steady as the fire inside, yet beneath the tasks, beneath the cold, beneath the routine, you sense something gentle. Christmas here may be humble, but it is sincere. It is a thread woven through duty, a quiet promise that even in a demanding world, warmth persists. Evening settles gently over the homestead, softening the edges of roofs and fences as you make your way back toward the house. The sky glows with the last traces of pale gold, then slides slowly into blue, and finally into a deep velvety dark. Christmas night in 19th century America carries its own kind of intimacy, shaped by candlelight familiar voices and the slow gathering of people who have spent the day balancing work and celebration. You step inside and instantly sense the shift from busy daytime rhythms to something quieter, warmer, and more reflective. The fire in the hearth burns brighter now, its flames reaching upward with renewed life after being tended carefully throughout the afternoon. The room glows with shifting amber light. A kettle rests near the fire, sending up tiny clouds of steam. Children sit cross-legged beside the hearth, speaking in excited whispers. Their cheeks are flushed from running errands and helping with chores. They know the evening will bring stories, music, and perhaps small treats that were held back earlier in the day. The woman of the house carries in a tray filled with mugs of warm cider. She sets it on the table with a gentle thud, the mugs clinking softly. The air fills with the scent of apples and cloves. According to numerous letters from the period, spiced cider or warm milk mixed with honey were common evening drinks during the winter holidays. They soothed tired bodies and marked the transition from labor to rest. You pick up a mug, letting the warmth seep into your hands. A few neighbors arrive soon after brushing snow from their coats. They stomp their boots at the doorway, laugh apologetically at the mess, and slide into the room as if drawn by the glow. In small communities, holiday evenings often turned into informal gatherings. People visited after chores were done, bringing baked goods, small gifts, or simply company. You hear greetings exchanged in low, easy tones. The atmosphere feels familiar, even though you stand centuries away. Someone places a tin plate of gingerbread on the table. The pieces are small, meant to be shared sparingly. The scent mingles with the cider, forming a warm, comforting blend. A detail occasionally mentioned in household journals of the era is that some families hid a single dried raisin or currant inside one piece of gingerbread, giving whoever found it a small symbolic fortune for the coming year. You notice the children eyeing the plate with a mix of strategy and hope. As the neighbors settle in, a man picks up his fiddle. The instrument has been resting near the hearth since the gathering the night before, its wood slightly warmed by the fire. He tunes the strings carefully, twisting each peg until the pitch feels right. The room quiets as he begins a gentle tune, slow and lilting. It drifts softly through the room, filling the air like a warm blanket. Notes rise and fall with a rhythm that matches the fire's quiet crackling. Many families relied on music to guide the emotional tone of their evening and personal diaries. From the time often highlight how cherished these gatherings were during winter months. A woman begins humming along. Her voice blends with the fiddle, calm and tender. The children hush themselves to listen. You feel the music settle into your shoulders, relaxing muscles you did not realize were tense. The tune shifts into something livelier, and the older children begin tapping their feet. One child even tries a few small dance steps, stumbling slightly on the uneven floorboards. Laughter ripples gently across the room. When the song ends, the man sets down the fiddle and leans back in his chair. Conversation blooms naturally. People share stories about the day, about chores completed, about animals behaving strangely, or neighbors needing help. Someone recounts how a rooster escaped its coop earlier that morning and had to be chased halfway across the yard. The crowd chuckles. A woman describes how her youngest child tried to feed a biscuit to the family cow. More laughter. You notice that storytelling holds an important place in the evening. Some accounts from the period mention that families often passed down tales, local folklore, and personal memories during these gatherings. A few stories were humorous, others cautionary, and some held deeper meaning rooted in cultural heritage. Tonight, the eldest neighbor, a man with a white beard and a voice like soft gravel, begins to share a tale from his own childhood. He describes trudging across miles of snowy fields to attend a Christmas barn dance when he was young. His words paint vivid scenes. Lanterns hung on rafters, footsteps stomping in time, boots slipping on dusty floors, young men and women trying to look confident while secretly praying not to embarrass themselves. The children lean closer, fascinated by a past that feels both distant and strangely familiar. You watch their faces glow in the firelight. The elder pauses to sip his cider before continuing. He explains how one winter the snow piled so high that the community tied ropes between houses, so people would not lose their way in the storm while traveling to holiday gatherings. Some modern researchers note that such stories appear in various regions, but disagree on how widespread the rope practice truly was. Whether literal or exaggerated, the tale reflects the challenges people faced in harsh winters. After the story ends, the room falls into a comfortable quiet. You hear the faint whistle of wind slipping through the cracks around the doorframe. The house creaks softly as its timbers adjust to the cold. Someone places another log on the fire, sending a shower of sparks upward. A young woman begins preparing a simple game on the table. She arranges small tokens carved from wood and a set of cards with hand-drawn symbols. The game resembles matching or memory tests, and she invites the children to join. Games like these appear frequently in letters and diaries of the time, often crafted at home rather than bought from a store. You watch as the children concentrate intensely, giggling when they make mistakes. The adults look on with fond amusement. At the same time, one of the neighbors brings out a homemade riddle book. He flips through the pages, each filled with short puzzles written in careful handwriting. Riddle books were surprisingly popular in rural and urban households alike, offering both entertainment and subtle mental exercise. He reads a riddle aloud. The room quiets as everyone considers the clues. Someone calls out an answer, prompting a burst of cheerful applause. The room grows cozier as the evening deepens. The fire glows a deeper orange. Shadows stretch across the ceiling in long, gentle arcs. The children tire after a full day of chores, excitement, and play. Some curl up on rugs near the hearth. One child falls asleep mid-sentence, her head resting in her mother's lap. The mother strokes her hair slowly, humming a soft tune. The older members of the group continue talking in low voices. They discuss weather forecasts, the state of nearby farms, and plans for upcoming weeks. You catch pieces of conversation about families moving westward, about new schools opening in neighboring towns, about relatives who sent letters from far away. These topics reflect the broader world gradually shifting around them. Personal accounts from the time show that such evenings served as informal news exchanges where information flowed from home to home in gentle ripples. On the table, the gingerbread plate sits half empty. A child finally discovers the hidden current and announces it triumphantly, sparking laughter from everyone in the room. The discovery feels like a small victory, a pocket of joy folded into the night. The man with the riddle book sets it aside and reaches for the fiddle again. This time, he plays something slower, softer. The notes hover in the air like snowflakes that never touch the ground. The melody wraps around the gathering, easing the final bits of tension left in the day. You sit quietly, absorbing everything. The warmth of the fire, the harmony of voices, the intimacy that grows naturally when work fades and people gather simply to be with one another. Christmas evening here is not defined by grandeur. It is shaped by companionship, small pleasures, and the knowledge that winter's challenges feel lighter when shared. As you prepare to rise from your seat, someone offers you one last mug of cider. You accept it, savoring the sweetness. Outside, the world remains cold and wide, but inside this room, comfort pools like light in each corner. You take one final look at the gathering, knowing the night will soon drift into sleep, and the chores of tomorrow will arrive with relentless punctuality. But for this moment, the house is full, safe, and softly glowing. You step outside into the quiet dark, carrying the warmth of the evening with you. You walk deeper into the town as night settles fully, and the glow of lamps and windows begins to reveal something you have sensed all along but have not yet looked at directly. Christmas in 19th century America is not experienced the same way by everyone. Wealth and scarcity sit side by side, close enough to touch, yet separated by layers of circumstance. As you move through the snowy streets, you feel the contrast sharpen with every step. One house glows with abundant warmth, its windows bright, its doorway framed with ribbons and greenery. Another stands dim and quiet, smoke only barely rising from a chimney that struggles to stay lit. You approach the first home, drawn by its warm, golden light. Through the frosted window, you glimpse a dining table heavy with food. A roast sits at the center, surrounded by dishes filled with cranberry preserves, sugared apples, baked squash biscuits brushed with butter, and a towering cake dusted generously with powdered sugar. Families with greater means could purchase imported goods from city markets, and newspapers from the mid-century frequently describe holiday tables that showcased prosperity. Candied citrus peels, jars of olives, and loaves made with expensive white flour. For wealthier households, Christmas was both celebration and display, a moment to show refinement and generosity. You linger a moment, watching servants carry plates and refill glasses. The family members dressed in fine wool coats and silk ribbons speak with easy laughter. Children in polished boots chase each other around the room without any concern for chores or responsibilities. Their cheeks glow pink from too much excitement rather than cold air. The sound of a piano drifts through the walls, its melody careful and practiced. Such households often prized formal music lessons, and holiday evenings became a stage for young performers eager to impress relatives. You step away from the bright window, letting the curtain fall back into place, and the contrast hits you as soon as you turn the corner. A smaller, weather-worn house leans slightly under the weight of snow on its roof. Its windows glow faintly, candles burning low because the family must conserve wax. Inside the table is modest a pot of vegetable stew, a loaf of coarse bread, a few apples that have been saved for weeks, and perhaps one small pie made from dried fruit. You see a mother ladling stew into wooden bowls, portioning carefully so everyone gets enough. According to numerous household diaries from the time, careful measuring and deliberate fairness were essential in homes where winter brought food scarcity. Two children sit at the table, pulling their thin shawls tight around their shoulders. Their clothes are patched in several places, and their boots appear too small for their growing feet. Yet there is joy here, too. The children speak quietly, pointing excitedly at the pie cooling near the window. Their eyes shine with a hope that does not depend on abundance. A soft knock sounds at the door of the modest home. An older neighbor arrives carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When unwrapped, it reveals one precious item, a fresh loaf of bread still warm. She explains that her family baked several and wanted to share one. Accounts from the period often describe such moments of generosity, especially among working-class communities. When wealth was scarce, kindness was not. People traded what they could: a loaf for a jar of preserves, a blanket for a pair of mittens, a candle for a basket of potatoes. You leave the doorstep and continue walking. The snow crunches softly beneath your boots. Ahead, you notice a group of children huddled around a small fire near a workshop. Their clothes are thin, and their hands tremble a little from the cold. They pass around a single stick of peppermint, taking tiny pieces so each can have a taste. Candy was expensive for poorer households, and many children received just one small piece for Christmas. A detail occasionally mentioned in reformers' writings of the time is that city orphanages sometimes distributed sweets donated by wealthier patrons hoping to brighten the children's holiday. Such acts, though small, often remained among the children's strongest memories. You approach a warehouse where workers finish unloading crates even though it is late. Laborers rarely receive Christmas Day off, especially in cities or on docks. Letters written by mill and factory employees describe long shifts that stretched even into holidays with only a few hours granted for supper or simple celebration. These men stand with shoulders hunched, breath rising thick in the cold. A foreman allows them to finish only when the last crate is stacked. Afterward, the workers exchange tiny gifts: a pair of knitted gloves, a small polished stone, a tin cup repaired with care. Their presents reflect both necessity and creativity. You drift into a wider street where a wealthier family's carriage pulls to a stop. The horses stamp the snow, and the lanterns on the carriage cast bright pools of light onto the ground. The passengers climb out wearing thick wool coats trimmed with fur. They speak cheerfully about visiting friends for Christmas supper. Meanwhile, across the street, a man carrying a coal scuttle pauses to watch. His coat is worn thin, his boots cracked. You see him adjust the scuttle on his shoulder before he heads back to his home, knowing he must ration every lump of coal to make it last through the coldest nights. You continue walking until you reach the poorer quarter of the town. Here the air feels heavier, the sounds subdued. Houses lean against each other as though sharing what little warmth they have. Inside one, a family eats a meal of broth and bread. They speak in hushed voices. A single candle burns on the table. Yet even here, small traditions remain alive. The father pulls from his pocket a folded piece of paper with a hand-drawn picture on it. His son had made it secretly using charcoal and scraps from an old ledger. The drawing shows the family standing together beside a tree much fuller than their own. The mother smiles as she holds it, her eyes shining in the dim light. She smooths the edges with her thumb and places it carefully on a shelf as though it were the finest gift in the world. Just a few streets away, the wealthiest mansion in town stands illuminated with dozens of candles. Servants hang sprigs of holly along a staircase, while guests in elegant attire remove their gloves and scarves. A long table covered in embroidered cloth stretches through the dining room. Oysters, roasted meats, sugared almonds, and molded gelatin dishes sit waiting. A harpist performs near the fireplace. Everything gleams, yet beneath the splendor lies another truth. Some journals written by 19th century social observers describe the discomfort that wealthier citizens sometimes felt during holidays, aware of the contrast between their abundance and the struggles of others. A few wealthy households organized small donation drives or delivered baskets to poorer families. Others held fast to the idea that prosperity symbolized divine favor. The differing perspectives remain a point of discussion among historians, trying to understand the moral frameworks of the time. You step back outside and let the cold settle around you. Snowflakes drift gently across the lamplight. The street stretches ahead, lined with homes that vary in warmth, brightness, and comfort. Yet, as you listen closely, you hear similar sounds from both ends of the social scale. Laughter music, quiet conversation, the soft clatter of dishes, the steady hiss of logs burning in fireplaces. Christmas in this century is not uniform. It is shaped by disparity, by resourcefulness, by kindness, and by an awareness that winter tests every household differently. You move toward a narrow alley where a group of women from the working quarter gathered to share leftover bread and broth. They speak with tired voices, but share smiles. One woman pulls out a single candle from her shawl. She places it in the center of the group, lights it, and says it is tradition in her family to make a wish for the coming year while watching the flame. The others nod and close their eyes. The candle burns steadily despite the cold breeze. You stand with them for a moment. The flame flickers, steady and brave. And in that small circle of light, you feel the heartbeat of the season, uneven, honest, shaped by hardship and generosity in equal measure. You leave the alley and continue into the night, carrying the contrasting images with you. Rich tables and humble bowls, bright windows and dim ones. Yet, everywhere you go, you sense the same desire to create warmth in the coldest part of the year. You follow a long, quiet road that stretches away from the town, the sounds of Christmas night fading behind you. Snow muffles everything now. The sky hangs low and gray, and the world feels both vast and still. As you walk, you sense a change in the air, something heavier than winter, something shaped by uncertainty and distance. Before long, the road leads you to a field where tents stand in rows, their canvas edges stiff with frost. A thin plume of smoke rises from a makeshift fire. This is the kind of place where Christmas takes on a different meaning entirely. A military encampment in 19th century America. The wind carries the scent of wood smoke and damp wool. You step closer and hear muted voices inside the nearest tent. Lantern light spills through the seams, forming thin golden lines in the cold air. Soldiers gather around a small fire pit, their coats pulled tight, their gloves worn thin. War has a way of reshaping every ritual, and Christmas is no exception. Letters written by soldiers across several conflicts in this century frequently describe the holiday as a mixture of homesickness, resilience, and whatever scraps of comfort they could find. You approach the circle and someone nods, gesturing for you to sit on an overturned crate. The fire crackles weakly. Its heat barely reaches your hands, but the glow is enough to soften the darkness around you. One soldier pokes the embers with a stick, sending sparks upward. Another holds a small tin cup filled with wheat coffee. Food is scarce here, and luxury is almost non-existent. Tonight, the men share what little they have: a biscuit saved from a ration, a sliver of dried apple, a handful of peanuts sent in a package from home. Each offering feels significant. A young soldier unwraps a scrap of paper from his pocket. It is a letter from his family folded many times, soft at the edges. He reads a line aloud about his sisters decorating a small tree at home. The mention of it brings a hush over the group. Many of the men stare into the fire, imagining their own families. According to numerous wartime journals, soldiers often coped with separation by sharing memories of holiday traditions, letting stories serve as a bridge between the battlefield and the distant warmth of home. Behind you, a tent flap opens. Another soldier emerges carrying a pot of stew so thin you can almost see the bottom of it. He ladles it into tin bowls. The broth smells faintly of onions and salt pork. Portions are modest, but the men accept them gratefully. As they eat, one soldier describes a custom from his hometown in which children paraded through the streets carrying lanterns on Christmas Eve. The others listen quietly. Someone mentions that in his region, families stayed awake late singing hymns by lamplight. You feel how these traded stories offer comfort, connecting men who come from very different places. Suddenly, the wind shifts, carrying with it the distant sound of drumming. The men glance toward the dark horizon. The sound fades quickly, leaving only the brittle whisper of the cold. You sense that the boundary between calm and danger is thin here. A few soldiers pull their coats tighter. One of them explains the patrol duties continue even on holidays. He jokes half-heartedly that the enemy never sends a polite note announcing a break. The others chuckle softly, though the humor hides a truth. In wartime, even sacred days are not guaranteed peace. You notice a small wooden box resting near the fire. A soldier opens it and reveals a bundle wrapped in linen. Inside, a small homemade gift sent from home, knitted socks, a handful of candies, a tiny book of psalms, and a carved bird made from walnut wood. Items like these appear frequently in preserved correspondence. Families sent what they could, hoping their gifts would offer warmth, distraction, or even luck. You watch as the man holds the carved bird in his hands, running his thumb over its wings. He sets it carefully inside his coat pocket as if it were made of glass. After the meal, one of the older soldiers clears his throat. He says he remembers a Christmas from years earlier when his regiment paused fighting for a single day. He describes the moment with slow, steady words. Opposing forces stood on opposite sides of a river, each side exhausted. That night, someone began singing a familiar hymn, and the melody drifted across the water. The other side joined in. For a brief hour, there was no shouting, no gunfire, only voices lifted in cold air. The men around the fire lean in, listening closely. A few smile, faintly. Accounts of such unexpected moments appear in various war records, though historians still offer differing interpretations of how widespread or spontaneous these shared pauses truly were. Some believe they were rare, others argue they were more common but underreported. The uncertainty lingers like a second shadow. After the story, the soldiers sit quietly for a moment. Then, someone begins humming a tune. Another joins. Soon, a low, rough chorus grows around the fire. The song is gentle, full of long notes that stretch into the night. Their voices waver now and then, not from lack of courage, but from cold and weariness. Still, the melody carries threading itself into the fabric of the evening. A soldier seated beside you tilts his head toward the sky. The clouds thin slightly, revealing a few scattered stars. He mentions that his mother believed wishing on a Christmas star would bring good fortune for the year ahead. He smiles softly as he says it, the expression small but sincere. Across different regions, families passed on similar beliefs, sometimes born from religious tradition, sometimes from folklore. Such practices rarely make their way into textbooks. They appear in private letters passed down through generations. As the men finish their song, someone pulls out a deck of frayed playing cards. They arrange themselves in a loose half-circle and begin a simple game. Laughter rises here and there, lightening the mood. Even in war, even in the cold, small games offer a tether to normal life. You watch them play, noticing how brief smiles warm faces that have grown accustomed to strain. Nearby, two soldiers sit slightly apart, speaking in hushed tones. One hands the other a small roll of cloth. Inside is a pencil and a scrap of paper. He suggests writing home before the night grows too dark. The second man nods slowly and begins to scribble, pausing often to gather his thoughts. The act of writing carries a weight that feels almost sacred here. Letters often served as both confessions and lifelines. Many were later found tucked into pockets, chests, or bedrolls, carefully guarded, even in chaos. The fire begins to burn lower. A soldier adds another piece of wood, but supplies are limited. The flames catch slowly, gently illuminating their faces once more. One man reaches into his coat and pulls out a small tin ornament, shaped like a star. Its edges are uneven, clearly handmade. He explains that his younger brother made it from a scrap of roof metal and insisted he carry it for luck. The ornament glints weakly in the firelight. It feels almost too delicate for a battlefield. You sense how objects like this become anchors, grounding men who have been torn far from home. Suddenly, a gust of wind sweeps across the camp, rattling the tents and stirring the fire. Snowflakes swirl in erratic spirals. A few men pull their blankets tighter. One stands and announces he must take the next watch. Duty rotates continuously regardless of holiday. As he walks away, the snow crunches beneath his boots, fading into the distance. The remaining men settle again. One gently taps ash from his pipe, another adjusts the blanket draped across his shoulders. Their breaths rise in pale clouds. You sense exhaustion woven into the silence, yet beneath it lies perseverance. They share what little they have. They pass warmth where they can. They carve out celebration from scarcity. You rise slowly, knowing it is time to continue your journey. As you step back from the fire, the soldiers nod to you. One raises his tin cup in a quiet farewell. You feel the weight of their world lingering on your shoulders. The cold tightens around you as you walk away from the camp. Behind you, the flicker of the fire grows smaller until it becomes a single point of light against the dark. You continue across the snowy field, carrying with you the memory of a Christmas shaped by distance duty, and the stubborn hope that even in the harshest places, warmth can still be found. You follow the path away from the encampment until the land begins to rise and fall in gentle slopes again, gradually drawing you back towards settlements where families move through the last notes of Christmas night. The snow is softened under your boots, turning from crisp to powdery, and the world feels as though it is exhaling after a long day. Ahead, a cluster of houses stands close together, each one carrying echoes of different languages, different customs, and different stories carried across oceans. Christmas in 19th century America is not a fixed idea. It is a living thing shaped and reshaped by the people who bring their traditions to its shore. You step into a neighborhood where German families have settled. Candlelight flickers warmly through lace-trimmed windows. When you peek inside one home, you see a tree standing proudly in the corner, its branches dotted with candles carefully anchored in small holders. The flames tremble like tiny stars. According to numerous family accounts from the period, German immigrants were instrumental in popularizing indoor Christmas trees in America, bringing with them long-held customs of decorating branches with sweets, fruits, and delicate handmade ornaments. A woman in the house places something shiny on a lower branch. You look closer. It is a small silvered nut wrapped in foil. Decorative touches like this appear often in the memories of families who preserved old-world traditions despite new surroundings. You watch as she hums softly and adjusts the candle flames to ensure they burn evenly. The room feels peaceful, glowing with a tender reverence. You continue your walk and soon reach a narrow street lined with homes where Irish families have gathered. Through one doorway, you hear lively singing. The rhythm is quick and the laughter is bright. Inside, a group sits near the fire, drinking a warm mixture of milk and spices. A loaf of barmbrack rests on the table, studded with dried fruit. A young girl slices it carefully, watching for the tiny objects baked inside. Finding certain items was believed to predict one's luck for the coming year. Visitors from the period mentioned this tradition as both playful and quietly meaningful, especially for families who carried their rituals through hardship and immigration. You slip farther down the road past a group of Italian neighbors standing outside, their hands cupped around steaming bowls of broth. Inside their home, a long table stretches across the room covered with dishes of fish, herbs, and small pastries. You can hear the rise and fall of conversations in a melodic cadence. A grandfather gestures animatedly while telling a story, his hands painting pictures in the air. A few children mimic his movements behind him, trying not to be seen. Letters preserved from immigrant families often mention how holiday meals became anchors of identity, helping people maintain a sense of home even when surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes. As you continue walking, the houses seem to merge into a patchwork of customs. Scandinavian families hang woven straw ornaments shaped like stars. English households place sprigs of greenery above their doors and recite familiar verses from memory. African American communities, both free and enslaved, observe Christmas with layered traditions shaped by ancestral heritage, Christian practice, and the lived realities of the time. In certain regions, many enslaved families held brief gatherings during the holiday, sharing meals, songs, and small tokens carved from wood or saved from their rations. Writings from the period, especially letters and diaries, document a wide range of these customs. Though each carry shadows of the hardships woven into them, you pause near one modest home where a group of people gathers outside around a fire. They sing a spiritual in a slow rising melody, voices intertwining with the crackle of burning wood. The sound carries a depth of emotion that makes you stand still. One of the elders adds a harmony that lifts the entire song upward. Later, he tells a visitor that music on the holiday brings strength, belonging, and connection to ancestors. The simplicity of the gathering radiates quiet dignity. Farther ahead, you see a shop decorated with paper garlands. Inside, a man with Scottish roots reads a poem aloud to a few friends. His voice swells with pride as he recites lines he knows by heart. Every few verses, someone nods or murmurs approval. Cultural gatherings like this, where poetry and songs formed communal bonds, appear prominently in newspapers of the era, especially in port cities where diverse groups lived side by side. These celebrations helped preserve identity, even while embracing the shifting traditions of a growing nation. You eventually find yourself in the heart of a bustling neighborhood where customs collide in ways both gentle and unexpected. A group of children from different backgrounds build snow figures outside, decorating them with scraps of cloth pine needles and bits of ribbon collected from various households. They laugh as they attempt to make the tallest one, whispering to each other in accents shaped by both homeland and new land. Though their families celebrate differently indoors, the children weave their traditions together with ease, forming something new without even realizing it. Your walk leads you to a small gathering hall lit by lanterns. Inside, families of varied origin share song, stories, and food. Someone passes around a tray of pastries dusted lightly with sugar. Another places roasted nuts in a bowl near the hearth. A young woman recites a blessing from her own childhood, and others nod even if the words are unfamiliar. One man compares his family's custom of exchanging small handmade gifts with his neighbors, tradition of lighting candles in the window. They laugh at the differences, but you sense admiration beneath the humor. Near the edge of the room, two older men hold a quiet discussion about how holiday customs have changed over the decades. One insists American Christmas is becoming more uniform, shaped by growing cities and shared inventions like printed cards. The other argues that regional and cultural differences remain stubbornly strong. Modern scholars examining these kinds of conversations offer varying interpretations of how quickly traditions blended and how much remained distinct. The evolution of American Christmas culture is a mosaic, its pieces shifting constantly across generations. As the lanterns glow and the fire crackles, a group begins a circle of storytelling. A woman from Norway recounts how her childhood Christmas Eve always included lighting a single candle at midnight and placing it near a window. A man from New England recalls watching his family hang stockings near the hearth, each made from scraps of fabric stitched by hand. A woman with Caribbean roots describes celebrating with food seasoned brightly even in winter, mixing flavors from her ancestors with what she found in American markets. The stories blend, echoing through the room like threads weaving into a single cloth. You sit with them for a while, absorbing the hum of shared memory. The air smells of pine spice warmth and a mix of foods that seem to belong to many kitchens at once. The laughter rises, rises again. The fire pulses with steady light. As the evening deepens, someone begins to play a tune on a small instrument. Another hums along slowly, different voices join each, bringing its own cadence. Some notes feel familiar, others foreign, but together they create a harmony that wraps around the room like a winter shawl. You realize that this is what the season becomes in a changing nation. A living exchange, a conversation carried through flavors, stories, music, and memory. Traditions shift gently as families share doorsteps, markets, schools, and roads. Some customs take root, others fade. Still others transform into something entirely new. When you finally step outside, snow drifts quietly around you. Windows glow with different colors, different arrangements, different rituals. You walk through the peaceful streets, feeling how the many threads of American Christmas stretch across the land, connecting distant families, distant memories, and distant homelands into one ever-changing celebration. Night folds itself gently over the town as you walk along the snow-padded street, each footstep sinking softly into the quiet. The sky has deepened into a shade of blue so dark it feels like velvet. And somewhere above the clouds, the moon tries to peer through. Houses glow here and there, small pockets of warmth scattered across the winter landscape. It feels as if the entire 19th century has drifted into a gentler rhythm, one made of sighs, soft voices, and fires burning low. You pull your coat tighter, drawn toward one last home, where the evening settles with the softness of a blanket. Inside the room glows with the final strength of the fire. Are its embers red and pulsing like a slow heartbeat? The tree in the corner still gives off its forest scent, but the candles have been extinguished for safety. Only the faint sparkle of strings made from berries and popcorn remains visible. You settle into a chair near the hearth, feeling the warmth press steadily against your legs. The family moves with a quieter purpose now. Their voices lower their motions slower. Christmas night has softened into something reflective. A woman sits in a rocking chair near the window, knitting the last rows of a scarf she plans to give tomorrow. Her needles click softly, creating a steady rhythm that blends with the crackle of the fire. She hums under her breath, almost without noticing. Her tune carries old echoes, perhaps from her childhood, perhaps passed down from her grandmother. Songs like these, described in many handwritten letters from the era, often belong to families rather than regions, cherished pieces of memory stitched into the night. A man nearby closes a worn book of poetry. He's been reading aloud for the past hour, choosing verses about winter hearth fires or long journeys home. At times he added comments about poets he admired or memories the line stirred. You notice the care with which he places the book on the table, smoothing its frayed cover. The love of poetry and storytelling was deeply rooted in many households of the century, serving as a bridge between work-weary days and peaceful nights. Two children sit curled on a thick woven rug, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They still hold the tiny wooden toys they received earlier in the evening. One traces the shape of a painted horse lost in thought. The other rocks a cloth doll back and forth as if soothing it to sleep. Gifts like these, lovingly carved or stitched at home, appear often in recollections from the period. They might have lacked shiny finishes or extravagant features, but they carried the warmth of familiar hands. As the room settles, an older neighbor who stayed late to visit begins talking softly about her own childhood Christmases. She describes her family sitting around the fire in an old stone house, listening to the wind scratch against the shutters. She recalls her mother placing a single tallow candle on the windowsill as a symbol of welcome, a custom passed quietly through generations. Such recollections are scattered across memoirs and personal writings, offering glimpses into traditions that vary from one household to the next. Some researchers today interpret these candle customs as remnants of older European practices, while others suggest they evolved independently within various American communities. The origins blur like breath on a cold window. The neighbor laughs softly as she remembers how she and her siblings tried to stay awake to catch sight of visitors bringing treats or stories. Her voice carries the weight of decades, but also a lingering sparkle. The children listen with half-closed eyes pulled toward sleep, yet unwilling to miss the story. You watch their slow blinking, feeling the comfort of their presence in the room. The mother finishes her knitting at last. She ties off the final stitch and folds the scarf neatly on her lap. When she looks up, her expression softens as she surveys her family, as if mentally preserving this moment for the future. She rises and drapes a heavy quilt over the children, who nestle deeper into the warmth without waking. The quilt, pieced together from scraps of old garments, smells faintly of lavender stored with it through the summer. Fabric items like this, lovingly mended and preserved, were treasured household objects that carried stories within every square. The father steps outside for a moment to check the weather. When he returns, he reports that a gentle snowfall has begun again, the flakes delicate and slow drifting. He lifts his hat and taps the snow off it before hanging it near the door. Winter nights like this appear again and again in letters from the time described as both beautiful and isolating, depending on the writer's mood. Tonight, the beauty seems to dominate. The room quiets into a steady hush. The only sounds are the fire, the soft shifting of logs and the faint creak of the rocking chair as the neighbor settles into it. Someone hands you a mug of warm milk flavored lightly with nutmeg. You sip it slowly, feeling the warmth unwind your shoulders. Drinks like this, mild and soothing, were common nightcaps for families who relied on comforting rituals to ease the day's fatigue. A teenage girl rises and lights a small oil lamp. She adjusts the flame until it glows with a soft amber light that casts gentle shadows across the walls. Oil lamps were central to nightly routines in the era, their warm glow guiding people toward restful moments. She places the lamp on a shelf where its light touches the faces of everyone in the room. With a quiet smile, she retrieves a wooden box filled with small trinkets and letters. She explains softly that her family keeps items here from Christmases past: a dried flower from a wreath, a ribbon saved from a long-ago gift, a page of handwriting from her grandmother. She lifts a scrap of cloth embroidered with tiny stars and shows it proudly. Objects like this rarely appear in formal histories, but survive in attics, memory boxes, and trunks, passed from hand to hand, carrying personal stories through time. The fire begins to glow lower, settling into a bed of embers. The warmth remains steady, but the flames themselves are calming, no longer leaping, but sighing softly. Someone begins to hum a lullaby, one so slow and soothing that even the air seems to settle. The melody is simple, shaped by long winters and long memories. It drifts around the room like a warm ribbon touching every corner. As you sit there, you feel the edges of the century soften. The rushing demands of the day fade. The noise from earlier gatherings dissolves into silence. Only the heartbeat of the home remains steady and gentle. The final stretch of Christmas in the 1800s is not about celebration or spectacle. It is about resting in the warmth created by others. It is about gratitude for simple comforts. It is about closing the day with softness. You rise at last, moving quietly so as not to disturb the children now fast asleep. The family nods to you warmly, their faces glowing in the low firelight. You step outside, letting the cold wrap around you. Snow drifts down like soft feathers. Chimneys release thin threads of smoke into the night. The world feels hushed, timeless. You breathe deeply, sensing that you stand at the very edge of the long journey. Christmas night settles around you with a gentle finality, inviting you to slow your breath, soften your steps, and let the story drift toward restful quiet. You stand beneath the falling snow, letting it gather softly on your coat, your shoulders, your lashes. The lights from the homes behind you glow like distant embers, warm and steady against the winter darkness. Each one feels like a heartbeat in the quiet, a reminder of families settling under quilts, fires dimming into gentle coals, voices drifting into whispers. The world exhales around you, and you exhale with it long and slow, letting the cold air slide into your lungs and slip out again in a soft cloud. The snowflakes fall slower now, drifting lazily in the still air as if they too are ready for rest. You take a few steps forward, feeling the powdery crunch beneath your boots, and the night seems to cradle each movement. No rush, no noise, just the hush of winter settling itself like a blanket over the entire century. The darkness feels kind rather than heavy, wrapping itself around you with a quiet promise of safety. Shadows soften, edges blur. Even the cold seems gentler, as if it understands that the world is ready for sleep. You breathe again, deeper this time, and let your shoulders drop. In the distance, a single window glows. A small orange square in a world of blue and white. You picture a fire burning low, a family drifting into dreams, the warmth inside wrapping itself around them with the same tenderness the snow wraps around you. Your footsteps slow. Your breath steadies. The whole landscape leans toward stillness, inviting you to lean with it. You let the last images fade like candlelight, dimming in a quiet room, drifting lower and lower, until only the soft pulse of calm remains. The night holds you gently, and you let yourself drift.